gone west as an author. And she tells a story about her cat named Minnie. And Minnie was kind of a scared cat. And after a very negative experience and encounter with the dog, Minnie became scared of her own tail. And whenever she would see her tail, she would run and hide. And then when Minnie would come out and she would see her tail, guess what would happen? She'd get scared. The tail was still chasing after her. And so one of the things that Marion talked about is that Minnie had anxiety over her tail. And she writes, Minnie's behavior taught me something. Many of the things that we fear we have little or no consequence of. If we stand up and face these fears, they have no power. Nevertheless, fear can make our life miserable. One of my favorite stories comes from Chuck Swindoll, and he tells about a time that he was in an airplane, and he wrote this. We were rapidly descending through a night of thick fog at 200 miles per hour, but the seasoned pilot of the twin-engine Aero Commander was loving every dip, roll, and lurch. At one point, he looked over at me, smiled, and exclaimed, "Hey, Chuck, isn't this great?" I didn't answer. I was sweating it out of my knees. As the lonely plane knifed through the overcast pre-dawn sky, I was reviewing every Bible verse I'd ever known and reconfessing every wrong I'd ever done. It was like hurtling 200 miles an hour down the Santa Ana freeway with a white bed sheet wrapped across the windshield and your radio turned up just beneath the threshold of audible pain. I couldn't believe my companion in flight. He was whistling and humming like it was all a bike ride to the park. His passenger, however, had 10 fingernails embedded into the cushion. I stared longingly for something, anything, that I could see through the blanket of white surrounding us. Our flight records may have indicated 2 passengers on that eerie Monday morning, but I can vouch for at least 3. An unyielding creature called fear and I shared the same seat. Fear. I one time heard a preacher say fear is a demon that robs many saints of their joy. A religious magazine one time asked its readers what was the number one thing, if they could preach, what was the number one thing that they would preach about. And their readers, all lay people, not clergy, all lay people, overwhelmingly said it would be a sermon against fear. The Mexican bullfighter El Cadorbis was one time asked if he was afraid of death. "No," he said, "only life scares me." Life scares a lot of people. It's too much like the man who seemed strong and healthy, yet he was just always sick, always visiting the doctor. And one time the doctor had a new nurse and noticed what was going on, and this new nurse turned to the doctor and said, "Is that man really sick?" And the doctor said, "He surely is. I don't know of a man who has a more serious set of complications. For 40 years, he has suffered agonies from imaginitis, scleroma, apprehenditis, and a general fearosis of living." Fear plays an important role in the life of Chris Gardner. As you know, his story was made into a movie called The Pursuit of Happyness. The story begins in the 80s, a very tough economic time. And in the book of the same title, he tells the story of how he always wanted to be a doctor. But he had to quit that dream when he gets caught in this get-rich-quick scheme of selling these bone density scanners, which you see up here in the picture, that no one was buying. And it leads to money troubles, puts his marriage in shambles, and the mounting debt, you find that his life just continues to get worse. Now, already in this sermon series, we have seen failure. We have witnessed stupidity. Now get ready for fear. Fear is robbing his family, him, of joy and happiness. And if you've seen the movie, you know it's difficult to watch. And I'll tell you, I read the book, and it is even harder to read. Fear is overriding his dreams that once guided his life. Now, I'm going to share with you a poignant scene from the movie, and I'm going to warn you, it is intense. These 2 actors are phenomenal. They are great actors, and they do a great job, but it is an intense scene. It is an argument over who's going to take care of their son. But as you watch, I want you to note how fear plays a role. Let's go ahead and turn off the lights there. As you watch that phrase, or as you watch that scene, the phrase that really got me is this phrase right here, go get happy. Now that phrase, yes, in the movie it was directed at her, but really it's directed at Chris Gardner. He's not happy. His wife is not happy. Their marriage is not happy. And fear has replaced any joy and pleasure in their life. In that scene, Chris Gardner has to decide if fear is going to control his life. Leslie Weatherhead tells a parable about a little boy that is walking by a witch's cottage. And the witch comes out and begins to chase him, but it's not a witch, it's now a cat. And so the little boy begins to run, and he looks over his shoulder, and that cat's turned into a cow. And he's continuing to run, he looks over, and that cow is turned into an elephant. And he looks over one more time, at that point he falls. At that point, all he's got to do is just stand up. And he notices when he stands up, the elephant stops. And when he takes a step forward, the elephant turns into a cow. And when he takes another step forward, the cow turns into a cat. He takes another step forward, the cat turns into a mouse. One more step, and the mouse runs underneath the door of the cottage of the witch. And according to Leslie Weatherhead, the moral of the story is, it pays to face up to your fears. It's a wonderful illustration. Step into your fears. But as we learn in the story of Chris Gardner, saying it and doing it does not always happen. John Acuff talks about this concept in one of his books. He writes, I hate the words by now. Not separately, I've never had a problem with by when it's on its own or supporting another sentence. I have no issue with stuff Christians like by John Acuff. It performs admirably in that example. And now. Now is a fine word too. Short rhymes with cow. Often the place people encourage you to live. I got nothing for love for now. But when those two words team up and hit the town together, fist pumping and drinking the night away, they become something entirely different. They're not peanut butter and chocolate together at last. They are orange juice and gasoline, helpful in isolation, napalm collectively. The problem is that by now is a phrase we say to ourselves when we're trying to believe the lie that it's too late to start pursuing our dream. As we survey our lives and stand on the edge of the possibility cliff, we start to say things like, if I were really going to be a high school teacher by now, I would have already had a few years of teaching experience. If I were going to be a musician by now, I'd be better at the guitar. If I were going to be a pastor by now, I would have gone to seminary. The goal of the phrase by now is to offer yourself a twisted justification that indeed you could have been what you wanted to be, but alas, you're too late. The tricky thing is that by now isn't age specific. You're telling yourself this at 25 or 55. And if you convince yourself of this, you also believe the next lie, which is don't start. The window of opportunity is closed. The ship has sailed. While I was busy working or parenting or paying off student loans, it's too late. Don't start. Don't let the phrase by now in. Like vampires in the Corey Haim movie Lost Boys, they can only come in if you invite it. In Chris Gardner's book, he does just that. He lets fear in. This is what he writes about this point in his life. Over the next 30 days, everything that I was and everything that I hoped for, that hoped to become, flew out the window. This was the beginning of the end of everything that had come before and the beginning of everything that would happen from then on. As the sole breadwinner, not only was I responsible for the three of us, and let me pause there. In the book, he actually has 2 kids. In the movie, you just see 1, but in the book, he has 2. So when he says the 3 of us, he's referred to as 2 kids. I was responsible for the 3 of us. But I was paying much more attention to what was coming in and what was going out. In the past, when I basically only had me to think about, even when Sherry and I pooled our resources, it was a very different ballgame. This was about putting food on the table for my growing children and me. More importantly, it was about creating a plan to provide for them in the future so we didn't have to live paycheck Fear moved in the form of food on the table, or money for rent, or worrying about too much money after the money was gone. Worry and doubt and fear replaces the enjoyment that we are supposed to have with life. I think it's time to turn to Scripture. Lois.
Our scripture is Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 20. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own people. You shall heed such a prophet. This is what you requested of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, if I hear the voice of the Lord my God any more, or ever again see this great fire, I will die. Then the Lord replied to me, they are right in what they have said. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their own people. I will put my words in the mouth of the prophet, who shall speak to them everything that I command. Anyone who does not heed the words that the prophet shall speak in my name, I myself will hold accountable. But any prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, or who presumes to speak in my name a word that I have not commanded the prophet to speak, that prophet shall die.
I'm going to share a story from the movie. Notice how fear was so important there, he couldn't even delight in his own son's joke. God sends boats and people and events our way that challenge and push us to move past fear. It may come in the form of a prophet, or in a word of encouragement, or in a colleague that says, hey, why don't you try it this way? Or in a moment where you're saying, I'm going to stop allowing fear to control my life, and I'm going to start living my dream. Jack Canfield, who wrote so many of those Chicken Soup for the Soul books, one time shared a story how he attended a Tony Robbins seminar where they all learned to walk on fiery coals. When we began, we were all afraid that we would not be able to do it, that we would burn the soles of our feet. As part of the seminar, Tony had us write down every other I can't that we had. I can't find the perfect job. I can't be a millionaire. I can't find the perfect mate. And then we threw them onto the burning coals and watched them go up in flames. 2 hours later, 350 of us walked on those burning coals without anybody getting burned. That night we all learned that just like the belief that we couldn't walk on burning coals without getting burned was a lie, every other limiting belief about our abilities was also a lie. Go get happy. It's about that dream in your life, about that moment when fear isn't a demon that pushes out happiness. Go get happy. That's when you ignore that message and someone says to you, you'll never make a living that way. Or you'll never be able to support a family on that salary, or you will never make it. And we settle. Go get happy is about those passions that you always knew were there. About that drive to be what God called you to be. About your abilities that you know that you still have. About that opportunity that lies out there. Now, go get happy doesn't mean you quit your day job. It does not mean leaving school, walking out of your marriage, forgetting your family. No, in fact, go get happy for Chris Gardner means sticking in that. He kept his day job while he reached for his dream job. John Acuff, who wrote that little segment I shared with you about by now, calls it falling in the love with the job you like. He writes, if you are ailing in one portion of your life, it tends to infect the other portions. If there's poison in a glass of water, no one says, hey, be careful, in the middle of that water, it's poisonous. The same principle applies to your work. Bad employees make horrible dreamers. You can't loaf on your day job all week and then expect to magically throw the switch on the weekend and hustle on your dream. The things you do on your day job tend to follow you home. Go get happy. It's pushing fear out of your life so that you can be open to happiness. And a surefire way to do that is to allow Scripture to settle in your heart. Deuteronomy says that God is sending us someone. A boat, a phone call, a friend that says, hey, I'm here whenever you need me. And it certainly is a moment when you let God in and allow God to push out fear that opens you up to be happy. I'm going to end today with one of my favorite scenes from